is it OK to let your 15-year-old go on holiday with friends? Now, the TV personality Kirstie Allsopp was reported to social services after admitting that her teenage son had gone abroad without any adults. Kirstie's son Oscar spent 3 weeks interrailing in Europe with a friend. Now, he was just 15 when he left and turned 16 last week. Kirstie defended this, saying, "Of course I miss spending the summer with our son, but I'm so proud of him and my loss is nothing compared to his gain and his encyclopaedic knowledge he now has of the differences between one McDonald's and another. If we're afraid, our children will be afraid. If we let them go, they will fly." Kirstie also said that parents often overestimate how dangerous the world actually is. Is that fair, Albie? Should we let 15-year-olds go interrailing?
Yes, I think if the 15-year-old is mature enough, as deemed by their parents who know their children the best, to be able to go interrailing around Europe with their friends at the age of 15, then I think that's totally fine. If it's a 16-year-old that is immature, the parent will know that and they will say no. And I think Kirstie exercised her parental duty very well, and I don't know why everyone is getting so hot and bothered about it.
Matt?
See, well, full disclosure, I know Kirstie and we're friendly, and I think she's great. I really like her.
OK, you've got that out of the way.
But now I couldn't believe it when I saw her tweet or her post on X for the first time. I feel uncomfortable talking about how other people parent, as a parent myself, but because she has made it so public, it has become a talking point. And in a way, I think she wanted it to become a talking point or expected it to be one because of this whole idea of not being too risk-averse. But 15 just strikes me immediately as too young, and I would probably say considerably too young to be going round Europe with someone who is only themselves 16. If they were with someone who was 18, well then, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be keen on it myself as a parent, but I could understand it much more because they would be with an adult.
But that is only...
with a 16-year-old, I'm afraid from me it's a no.
That's only 2 years of a difference.
Yeah, but we decide as a society that the age of adulthood is 18 and 15 is far off that. I went interrailing, you know, as a sort of middle-class kid or, you know, young adult. In 1998, I was 18 years old. It was never talked about as a possibility that I would go when I was 16 or 17. I mean, people who got involved in this debate were saying, oh, back in the day we were doing all this and that. I certainly wasn't. 18 felt like a sort of coming-of-age moment for me, and it was absolutely the right age.
But we've decided that 16 is the age of consent. 16, you can vote in Scotland. 16, you can enter the army. You won't be in the front line, but you can start training. There's lots of things we've deemed it acceptable to do at 16, and yet we won't let our children travel and explore and learn.
Well, as far as I understand, no laws have been broken here. So this is a sort of personal question for parents. And as a parent myself, there's absolutely no way, and I think my wife would agree with me. I mean, can you imagine the range of possibilities that could happen to a 15-year-old when they spend 3 weeks interrailing or whatever they're doing around European capitals? I mean, you don't need me to spell it out live on national television. All sorts of terrible things.
Would you give them unregulated access to the internet?
Not just to boys and not just to girls, but also to boys? Would I give my children unregulated access to the internet?
With a smartphone, for example?
I mean, my child is only coming up to 2, but I can tell you we'll be having very serious conversations between ourselves, Laura and I, as he becomes older, about how we get a grip on what he sees and doesn't see online.
What do you think about Kirstie's comments, Albie, about the fact that parents often over-egg how dangerous the world is? We catastrophise it to our children. Do you think that's fair?
She's absolutely right. She's totally right. Parents nowadays have got this idea that the outside, the real world, is so dangerous that they can't let their children go out, that the real world is just so dangerous their children won't be able to handle it. And so what's happening is we've got this generation of children who are anxious, who are depressed, who don't even like answering phone calls, actually. They will let phones ring and then WhatsApp back instead.
Or the door.
And they have very bad social interaction. And we are almost losing our humanity because of this aversion to any sort of real world risk, whilst at the same time taking all of these crazy risks online, seeing all of this content which is far too much for our brains to really process properly. And we're out of step, and I'm actually quite surprised that Matt is so cautious on this issue, when actually teenagers have been doing things like travelling around Europe and far more exciting things like that for the entirety of humanity.
not
And they
I'm
got
not
on
sure-
fine.
I'm not sure that's right.
Did you go travelling when you were younger?
No, I wasn't cool enough to be invited by the cool group that went interrailing.
I don't
when
know
they were
anyone of
16.
my cohort, and we're hearing a lot about cohorts at the moment. I don't know anyone from my cohort who was interrailing around Europe at 15 or 16. And by the way, you are spot on about the online dangers to children. But the way to tackle that isn't to send your 15-year-old child round Europe.
I wonder whether the fact that we have mobile phones now actually might make it safer in the way that, as a parent, Kirstie would have been able to have constant contact with her son, and he would have been able to contact her if ever an issue had arisen. I don't know whether they did or not. Roy from Peterborough, you're up first. What do you think about letting kids go off at 15? Is it too young?
No, not at all. I mean, I basically feel that when I was 15, I was at work.
What did you work as at 15, Roy?
I was a salesman in a menswear department. And a lot of my generation were. I'm 75 now, so it sort of worries me that the social services poke their nose into something when they should be dealing with children that are being abused.
Well, the social services element is a whole other discussion on whether we think that was appropriate or not. But I'm really interested in the fact that you're from an older generation. You were working at 15. I mean, to be fair, working as a salesperson, at a local shop is probably a little bit safer on a daily basis than going interrailing across Europe. But that said, do you not think that 15-year-olds now are a very different breed to 15-year-olds in your day? They're younger almost now, are they not?
I think you may be right, but as one of your people said there, the whole thing is that they've grown up in a different generation, and I think our older generation, such as Kirstie Allsopp, would want their children to be more worldly wide, and they've been stopped from doing that, I think.
Yeah, it's a difficult one as a parent, and maybe that's what we're doing here with this whole discussion, is we're balancing up our want for our children to develop their own sense of self, to develop some robustness, and also wanting to continue to give them a childhood for longer. Sure. And that means sort of mollycoddling them.
And all of those things without your child at the age of 15 going off around Europe for 3 weeks. There's a sense of proportion, I think, that's important to be grasped here. With my child, I am really acutely aware, as I've already intimated, about not just the dangers later on of the online world, but of too much screen time. So we get him out. He loves balls. The first word he pretty much said was ball. I mean, it's a running joke amongst our friends and families. He's kicking balls, he's throwing balls, he's sort of very physical. He spends very little time in front of screens. We want him to engage with other children, with adults. We want him to feel very much part of the family, where we have done all the childcare ourselves.
And that all sounds great.
We take him everywhere we go, right? We don't go on holiday without him. But I will not, when he's 15, I promise you, I will not.
But what if he turns into an incredibly mature individual with incredibly mature friends? He has a passion for railways and intercontinental travel and a real passion for it, and he just desperately wants to go, and it's a passion.
He can do it when he's 18, maybe even perhaps when he's 17, but not when he's 15. I can't tell you, like, you know, we all have responses to news stories, and sometimes they're more visceral, more personal than others. As soon as I saw this, as I said, I thought this is just a no-no. He can do it when he's an adult, and of course we want to encourage him to get out and about.
And I felt a visceral response in the complete opposite direction. I thought, this is brilliant, and actually Kirstie tagged a brilliant organisation in her initial tweet called Free Range Kids, which is this organisation is all about getting kids out in the world, experiencing the real world more than the online world, and that's so important. And I don't think there is anything better for a young person than to go travel and go and see the world, understand different cultures, have these new experiences, and then bring those experiences home and then make this country a better place.
I mean, people have had such a passionate reaction. We've got lots of people on the phone line, so I'm going to get to you in a second. I just want to find out how our panel feel about the social services element to this story. So there was such a backlash to what Kirstie had posted that people had actually called social services, and they had followed up. I mean, you're against it, but do you think that's a proportionate response?
No, I don't, but my understanding, and I can't be certain that I'm right on this, my understanding is that social services have an obligation to follow up if they are contacted. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they were taking a censorious view of this themselves. And certainly from what I've heard, Kirstie Allsopp hasn't said that she's going to be placed under investigation or anything like that. So no, that I understand where they're coming from, but if they were to try to take any sort of action, for me, that would be disproportionate.
What do you think, Albie?
I think it's a complete overreaction. I mean, I was listening to an interview Kirstie gave earlier on today where she spoke about the fact that actually there are cases reported to social services that are malicious, and she believed this to be a malicious reporting. And when those cases are reported, social services don't follow up. So why the council that she lives in thought it was appropriate to get in touch with her today, I just think is ridiculous.
All right, back to the phones. Elizabeth from Liverpool, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, just generally 15-year-olds going abroad, is it an appropriate age?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely great. I did it myself when I was 16. I saved up for my Interrail card, and off I went for 3 weeks with my boyfriend.
Oh.
And I'll never regret it. It was an absolutely wonderful experience, and we had such a laugh. And I remember those holidays at 16. What else would I have been doing, you know?
Well, I wonder, first of all, what did your parents think about it at the time?
Nothing.
Well, they must have had some sort of thought. Were they excited for you? Were they worried for you? Did they want to make sure that they knew what all the arrangements were?
No, they didn't know. Well, we had no arrangements. We just went. We went from, we just got our rail card. There was no phones, mobile phones or anything like that. So we didn't arrange anything in advance. We would just arrive somewhere and go and look for a hotel and sort ourselves out with food. And we had rucksacks on, and we were just walking around all over the place and visiting the sites. We went shopping.
Did you get into any kind of bother when you were out there, Elizabeth, that you felt that you weren't maybe mature enough to deal with?
No, not at all. Nothing.
It was
absolutely nothing. But it is a long time ago. I'm 65 now. This is when I was 16. So I don't know how Europe has changed in that sense. In some ways, is it more dangerous? In other ways, is it less dangerous? Because you do have the mobile phones and the this and the that, whereas we didn't. And so there's, on the one hand, it's less. On the other hand, it's maybe more. Big things that are going on. So you have to, but I would definitely recommend it for anybody. It was a brilliant time.
Elizabeth, it's great to have heard from somebody who's actually done it around the same age. Thank you so much for your call, and incident-free as well. Kim from Bristol, what's your view on this one?
Yeah, hi, good morning. I think this is a whole thing that's been blown well out of proportion. I mean, I like I said to your researcher, I hitchhiked up to London when I was 14. When I was 15, I joined the army. I joined as a junior leader. I also hitchhiked up to the Edinburgh Festival on leave at the age of 15.
Is it different doing all of that within the United Kingdom, though? Is it different going abroad where they speak a different language, where it's different currency?
Well, I mean, I can't say at the age of 15 that I ever went to Europe, but I think that I think it's brilliant what she did. I think that everybody should be allowed to travel around Europe. I mean, particularly nowadays, like you said before about mobile phones, it's a lot safer. I just think this is a non-story, if you like. I have 3 children. I've always encouraged them to spread the wings and travel. I took my son when he was 13 to Italy on the back of my motorbike. We had no problems then. My daughter, she's travelled a lot around the world.
But at what age, Kim, did your daughter start travelling?
16.
OK, so again, roughly the same age. And I do wonder whether if the story had come out that Kirstie Allsopp's son, Oscar, was 16 when they went travelling, whether we would mentally have a different feeling about that.
To some extent, but still, for me, 16 is young to be travelling around Europe. I do wonder, this mobile phone point is perhaps important, because when I went off to Australia and America and Canada when I was 19, I didn't have a mobile phone because I'm that old. So I can just imagine what my mum must have been thinking, and my dad. I had to do reverse charge calls at times from South America when I was travelling around with my cousin. It's a very different world. So maybe that gives parents a little bit more of a sense of security, and indeed the teenager themselves.
But what you said there, I mean, Kim, you sound like a fabulous father, somebody that's allowed their children to free range, to roam free. Amazing. If you have the guts to do it, and I do wonder whether Kirstie Allsopp has a point when she says that if the parents are afraid, the children will be afraid, and whether trying to give out a different energy might be the right approach. I don't know. I think I will be the afraid parent. Kim, thank you very much for your call. Susan from Lincolnshire, what's your view on Kirstie Allsopp letting her son go off at 15?
I disagree with her. I think I grew up in the city. And we had Derbyshire and Yorkshire on the border, sort of thing. We used to go off, I know camp, we didn't go abroad, but we used to lie to our parents and say that we were going to stay with ex-friend. That friend said they were going to stay with us. We didn't have phones, admittedly, so parents couldn't check up on us. And we just went out into Derbyshire. We slept in bush shelters and goodness knows what. No harm came to us, but we did come across various other things that, you know, that could have happened, but we dealt with it. We were not at 15.
Susan,
we
with all
weren't
of that,
children.
with all that in mind, I mean, it sounds like you were incredibly adventurous, if that's the way to put it, when you were 15. But you think that it's safer to be within the confines of, you know, like where you grew up. I do wonder whether actually this young boy, Oscar, was far safer than you were sleeping in a bus shelter, because Oscar's parents knew where he was. There was a plan to where he was going to be staying. He had a mobile phone. There was contact back and forth. And actually, you know, Oscar's parents were in full access of all the information, it would seem.
I'd had the money and the chance, I would have done it abroad as well.
Okay,
it was just that.
So you're in support of Kirstie then?
I am actually, yeah, because I think at 15 I'd gone to work, I was working. You know, you're not an adult, but you're not a child either, and you do know the sense of danger if your parents have brought you up correctly, all right, or whatever.
Yeah, I think you've really hit the nail on the head there. It's a really difficult time because you are not yet an adult.
It's interesting that
but you're no longer a child.
Gender hasn't really been brought into this, and I wonder whether some of those supporting Kirstie Allsopp would feel the same if it was a 15-year-old girl. Well,
it was actually brought up with Kirstie whether she would let her daughter do it, and she said she absolutely would, because actually young boys are far more likely to be violently attacked than young girls, although young girls could potentially be raped and all of those sorts of things, which is obviously a massive concern for people. But Kirstie says, nope, she feels the same way about boys.
So you're the only person in this show so far. We've had lots of callers, you're the only person who agrees with me.
I didn't say I agreed or disagreed.
I thought you'd be more of a scared parent, you said.
Oh, right, yeah. I mean, who knows, but I don't know what my end outcome will be or whether I'll be able to mask that or not. I don't know. Susan, like how you just assumed I agreed with you, though. I have no opinions. Susan, thank you so much for your call. Thanks for all your calls on this. Now,